pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all. Okay, we are gathered here tonight for a workshop, and first on the agenda is a presentation from Bates College on a new science building.
Thank you, Mayor. Thank you, councilors. My name is Chris Streifel. I'm the project manager at Bates College here for the project that we'll be introducing. With me here tonight is...
Good evening, Mr. Mayor, councilors. My name is Michael Hinchcliffe. I'm an architect with Payette Associates in Boston. We're the architects for the new Science Center for Bates College.
And also with me is Jan Wigman, civil engineer, and Pam Wachowski, also from Bates College. So we're here to introduce the new STEM project that we are working on at Bates, and it's a new science building along Campus Avenue. We're here to preview some of the easement requests and street modification requests that we'll be making as a part of this project. But first, I'd like to give you just a quick backstory on the project itself. So to a large degree, this project was born out of a very extremely generous gift that was announced back in the summer of 17. The gift of $50 million by the Bonney Family Foundation, which was designated to support new and modernized STEM facilities at Bates. STEM is a kind of a fancy new word now for science, meaning science, technology, engineering, math. So a new science building and renovations to existing science buildings. So to best understand how to use this gift, Bates conducted a study of all of our science facilities, Carnegie Science, Dana Science, to understand the physical condition of those buildings, the functional condition of those buildings, how are they serving the needs of the programs within, and then to develop a comprehensive plan for how we can undertake new construction and renovations to take best advantage of our opportunities. So we learned that in general, our science facilities are literally bursting at the seams. Many of the programs lack sufficient space and resources to advance their teaching and research goals, and we learned that many of the teaching spaces are actually dated and not suited to modern teaching methods. We also learned that many of the critical infrastructure systems have reached or exceeded their useful service lives and were in need of replacement and major renovation. So using what we learned, we developed a three-step process working with Payette of build, renovate, and refresh. And so a new science building is the first phase of that undertaking. And that's what we're here tonight to develop a little bit more with you. The new science building would be constructed between Bardwell and Nichols on Campus Avenue. Following that, Dana Chemistry receives a renovation by being allowed to empty into the new building, and then following with some light touches to our Carnegie Science Center. So, but the focus of the evening is on new science, and before I turn it over to Michael to walk you through some of the details of the project and the easements and so forth, I would just say that we workshopped last night with the planning board, and I think I would be right to characterize it as a favorable response from the planning board. Based on any input that we receive here tonight, along with the planning board workshop, our intent is to submit the development application next week to support a October 22nd planning board review of the development application. And that would set up a follow-up visit with this council in early November 6th. So that's kind of where we're coming from, where we're going, and I'll turn it over to Michael.
Thank you, Chris. So thank you again for your time this evening. I'll very briefly describe the project to you as an overview. It is a three-story building that will be located on Campus Avenue between Bardwell and Nichols Street, adjacent to the two dorms that Bates completed several years ago. The program includes new science laboratories for research and teaching, as well as classrooms, seminar rooms, offices, and support spaces to help Bates in the modernization of their science facilities. The project is within conformance of all height, zoning, and use restrictions for the site. What we'd like to talk about tonight are 5 easements that will allow the project to take place. They're very similar to easements that were put in place and agreed upon for the 2 new dormitory projects that permit the building to function off of the main campus systems and to continue the level of quality construction that they've established on Campus Avenue to date. The first 2 easements are along Campus Avenue, and they are relating and similar to those put in place for the 2 new dormitories, and they are for paving and specialty paving to allow for pedestrian crossings and increase safety for pedestrian crossings. There's a figure that's in the packet that we distributed to you in advance that indicates these. Those are easements number 1 and 3. Easements number 2 and 4 are along Campus and Bardwell and Nickel Street, and they are reciprocal permits for sidewalk use. In this expansion project, we are improving the curb and storm drainage of both Campus and Nichols by establishing an esplanade between the sidewalk and the street for increased pedestrian safety and to allow us to plant street trees in those locations. Because of the location of the sidewalk in the building, the easement will provide for reciprocal maintenance and use, given that the sidewalk will be partially in city property and partially on Bates property. The other easement is easement number 5. This would be an easement across Bardwell Street to allow Bates to extend their campus utility network and supply the new building with electrical power from the campus distribution loop. This is again similar to easements that are in place along Nichols, Bardwell, and other streets in the area. Are there any questions that I can answer regarding the streets, street use, the site plan, or the easements?
Proceed.
Thank you. The next topic that we'd like to discuss with you is parking. As Chris mentioned, we had a workshop yesterday evening with the planning board, and that's after several preliminary workshops with Public Works and the planning board over the past 6 months. The project will create a net new 9 parking spaces in the area. There are the elimination of 2 curb cuts along Campus Avenue and Nichols Street, but in general it's a creation of 9 new parking spaces. There are 18 parking spaces on a lot that's on the street, that's off the street, accessed from Campus Avenue. Those will be replaced and augmented with additional accessible spots, and there will be modifications to street parking along Nichols Campus and Bardwell as well.
Council Marco.
How many net add or deletes on-street parking?
So on-street parking, there is a net deletion of 6 spaces.
6.
And the reason for that is, again?
So the reason for the net deletion of on-street parking spaces is from the establishment of curb cuts for the new through parking lot that is to the south of the building, as well as for the establishment of curbs and esplanades along Bardwell and Nickel Street adjacent to Campus Ave.
Councilor Bray.
One thing that I am interested in hearing about, and I'm not sure, I doubt it's your purview, maybe more Chris's, is while these spaces are eliminated during construction, if there's a plan to supplement them around the campus. Most of my ward is campus, so there's a lot of complaints about parking, and just wondering if there's a plan and if we'll see it to address that.
So I would say that that's still an ongoing thinking process as far as where I assume you're speaking particularly about the 18 spots on the Nickel Street lot and where those spaces are going to be during construction. Yeah, I don't think we've identified a specific plan at this point, but something that we're actively looking at.
Thank you.
Council Marco.
So if I've done my math right, you said there'd be a net new 9 spaces, so if there's 6 that's coming off the street, there's 15 being added somewhere?
Yes, that is correct. The existing surface parking is 18. We will have, and the additional 15 spaces will be there, correct.
I think I saw
33. Yeah, 33 off-street parking spaces, including 2 accessible spaces at the building's southern entry.
Continue.
Okay, thank you. The final item that we'd like to discuss with you this evening are street modifications. The project will bring teaching laboratories, classrooms, and research laboratories across the street, and will be linked to the 2 new dormitories by an extension of the sidewalk improvements along Campus Avenue. One of the features that we would like to introduce is a new pedestrian crossing along Nickel Street. This would be similar to the crossing that was established with the dormitories at Bardwell Street, as well as a slight modification to Campus Avenue to increase the plaza that would be opposite the main building entry for increased pedestrian safety. These new street improvements would create traffic calming zones at both corners with new crosswalks that would be illuminated and similar to the others that Bates has established across Campus Avenue with the dormitory projects.
So have you talked to Public Works about what type of crosswalks they will be and to what level?
Yes, we have. So in our first two meetings with, informal meetings with Public Works, we discussed the street improvements and what would be best for snow removal and maintenance of the street. So on the southern half of Campus Avenue, we're proposing one new pedestrian extension that would align with the crosswalk. The crosswalks will be flush and painted. However, on the north side of Campus Avenue, we're suggesting only a slightly raised traffic calming zone, not a full curb, to ease in maintenance of that area. And Public Works is in support of these modifications.
Excellent.
Any other questions that we can answer for you about the proposed easements, parking modifications, or the project itself?
I have some questions that weren't really part of those three topics, but one of them is the parcel or parcels that will be consumed. Are they all currently owned by Bates?
Yes, that's correct.
Were any of them tax-paying parcels?
They're all academic use and not currently taxable.
So there's no net loss of parcels. Okay. And I noticed the science building in the blueprint looks like it's right up against the property line.
No, it is not. There are several feet setback on both east and west. To the north, we're aligning with the 30-foot setback. That is the face of the dormitory at the east part of the building, and it does incline slightly to the north as we approach the campus quad.
Okay, which direction is north? Is that campus?
North is up on the page, Campus Avenue.
So there is a setback
Yes.
from Bardwell and Nichols?
That is correct.
Those were my two questions.
Thank you, sir.
Okay, thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you, Mayor. Thank you, Council.
Thank you.
Ed, when will they come back for an action? Is there a plan on that?
We're targeting November 6th.
Thank you.
November 6th is election night. We will not have a council meeting that night. So your choices become October 16th and November 19th.
No,
Right?
20th?
November 20th, excuse me. So October 16th or November 20th.
I would suspect it'll be the November 20th, but we'll have to review that information and see how that works out.
Okay, great, thanks.
All right, now it's time for a discussion to set on some issues and items for the upcoming joint meeting with the school committee. I believe that's next
Yes, it is. Let
25th.
me just remind everybody that during the council retreat, we talked about trying to improve communications, meet more frequently with the school committee. And at that time, the kinds of things that were talked about were the budget format, coming up with something that's simpler and easier to understand, cooperating on shared educational goals. I think you may recall that the school superintendent provided the school committee's goals, which, as I recall, was a rather lengthy list that were mostly, they weren't quantifiable in large measure, or weren't set out in any kind of a quantifiable scheme. And then there's also, was on the list, was establishing joint metrics to measure progress. So that was what came out of the council retreat. Had a brief opportunity to talk to the school superintendent, and I know he is planning actually on having a discussion the night before we meet with them about budget format. So hopefully there'll be something coming forward on that. I know he's also probably interested in giving the council an update on the fine arts program facility effort that's going on in regard to the high school. So I know that's another issue, and I suspect there may be other issues. I understand it was discussed at the school committee last night. So perhaps Councilor Ray could update us on what the school committee's thinking.
Yeah, so we will be having the meeting on the 24th to discuss budget format. I believe that will be a workshop with the chief administrative officer to see what she took our feedback, and some of that feedback was representative of what the council had relayed to me as a representative to the school committee, and she's going to produce something that hopefully works a little bit better for everyone. I think a couple of the things that were discussed both at the school committee meeting and in my one-on-one check-in with each of the representatives to the school committee was wanting to fuel more cooperation and rather than a hierarchical structure between the city council and the school committee, which is definitely interesting because I think they're looking for a lot more participation, but understanding the constraints that folks were elected to city council and not to go to school committee meetings. So I think that will be a subject of discussion of how we interact with each other. I think one good reminder that I hadn't thought of, you know, I try to offer myself to you all and to all members of the school committee as a liaison, but folks can go directly to their own ward representative on the school committee, and I think establishing a relationship with your counterpart could go a long way towards helping have these conversations in a cooperative manner. I think the other part of it, going back to budget as well, is discussing what the council is looking for in the LCIP and in regard to the minimum local share discussion. So I think it was referenced a couple of times that the state sets an expectation for how much the city will raise locally for the school department, and the superintendent had indicated that in the past the council would like to raise the minimum required, and so discussing that in advance with the school committee would be a great idea, I think, and then also better understanding and education among ourselves and among our citizens and voters about what that means to raise that amount. I think that sums it all up.
Okay. Are there any other issues that the council would be interested in putting on an agenda for that meeting?
So I don't have any additional, that seems really loud tonight. I don't have any additional items for it, but I guess I think I would second what maybe Councilor Ray heard at the meeting last night, and just that we're being more collaborative. And I think that, you know, it's easy for us to sit up here as a group and say we need to be more collaborative. The idea of actually, you know, touching base with your cohort on the school committee, and I will admit that I haven't done that myself, but, you know, going forward, I think it helps to sort of create individual relationships. But I have always felt in my time on the council and in my time sort of overlapping on the school committee that there is sort of this not combative relationship, but not maybe the most collaborative relationship. And I really, you know, think that it's going to be important for us going forward in terms of budget issues, but also, you know, greater administrative issues, that we really sort of try to build upon that relationship. So I'm hoping that they are having the same conversation about things that they want to discuss with us, and that they, you know, kind of aren't feeling like we're trying to drive this meeting, or, you know, drive their work or tell them how to do their jobs. Because I think that this is a lot more about relationship building than it is about anything else, for me anyway.
Yeah, I mean, it's pretty clear that in the normal routine of events, the school committee only comes before the council when they want something. So they come in here asking for money in the budget process or asking for items in the LCIP, and I think that may play into what Councilor Ray indicated, that kind of, you know, who's the boss, you know, it's one thing coming hat in hand and asking for something, it's another thing having a conversation among equals.
And in their defense, I mean, and I know that you didn't mean it this way, but they're coming here because that's the way that the process, they're coming here
Yes.
in that way because that's how the process has been
Yes,
set up.
that's exactly what I meant.
And so changing that process, I think, is what we need to focus on.
And I thought about this too, once someone brought up the LCIP and the school's needs there, I thought about, there's also that same sort of tension with the planning board, right? You know, they work kind of parallel and they make recommendations, but the city council then votes on it. So there's definitely a tension that exists there, and I think you're right, relationship building is going to be a path forward to lessening that tension and having more understanding. I will also say, you know, the budget was prepared before any of us were elected, back in the winter. So I think we're at a distinct advantage having this discussion now in the fall and really preceding any budget conversation. So I think now that there's not actual items and dollars at stake, it could be a much more comfortable conversation too.
Okay. Anyone else with some thoughts for the meeting? Excellent.
One thing that I would urge everyone is when we do have this meeting, feel free to speak up. I always get the feeling, as an observer at those meetings, that it's hard to get interactions going because nobody steps forward and really says much. So I'll just throw out a challenge to feel free to speak at this meeting and see what happens.
Can I
Good or
ask
bad?
about the meeting?
Yes?
Who will be chairing the meeting? Is it like traditional public meeting, or can it be more conversational, as you're suggesting?
It can certainly be as conversational as we want to make it. We don't have to run it through Parliament. I mean, it's a workshop, it's not a formal meeting, so I think it can be fairly informal. Bill and I had briefly touched on that, and we didn't come to a conclusion because we felt like we needed to probably talk to the mayor and the school committee chair to figure out how they wanted to structure the meeting.
I would add that the two meetings run very differently. And so reconciling that before we get in a room together and knowing what the expectation of each other is would be very helpful, I think, for all participants.
So you're schizophrenic already, right, since you're on both? Right?
Yeah, a little bit.
What would you recommend in particular?
Wasn't prepared to answer that. I think establishing, I think there should be a chair of the meeting just to keep us on track. But that's the parliamentarian and me speaking. Will there be an agenda, or will it just be?
Yes, there will be an agenda that Bill and I are going to try to put together in cooperation with the mayor and the school committee chair. Ideally, quite honestly, if we had lots of money and wanted to, I'd suggest hiring a meeting facilitator. But
I think between me, you, Bill, and Francis, we can figure something out and email the council in advance of the 25th.
Setting
And
the
let them know
expectation is important.
what the deal will be when we get there.
And that's here in this council chamber?
no, we're meeting at the Green Ladle.
Oh, the green light.
They're going to feed us too.
Yeah.
You know,
was gonna ask if there would be
I would suggest that all of you give at least a little bit of thought. If we were kind of, to throw out opening statements where everybody could say something, what exactly would you want to say about the school, where schools should be going, what the relationship between the city and the schools are? That might become a good way to engender some communication and discussion back and forth.
Councilor Bean?
I agree with the facilitator. I think if we want that kind of an informal sharing of ideas, I think that we need a facilitator to do that, and perhaps not somebody who's on either the council or the school committee, or maybe even anybody who's in administration. If we could get us an outside facilitator, that would be great, I think.
Councilor Cludier?
I was just going to say, I think having someone chair the meeting is a good idea, but I think there's the way that they run their meetings and even the way that we run our meetings is pretty formal, and there's not a lot of opportunity for the kind of speaking up that you're talking about. And so, to me, having it be a more informal conversation, I feel like gets us further along that path, with the understanding that there's somebody there to sort of guide us back if it gets too off topic.
Okay. Councilor Lewiston?
Is that time already?
Appears that way.
I'd like to make a motion to move into executive session pursuant to MRSA Title I, Section 4056C, to discuss an economic development issue of which the premature disclosure of the information would prejudice the competitive bargaining position of the city.
Second?
All in favor? All right. We're in executive session.
And I will apologize, there were a number of other items that were supposed to be on the agenda tonight, and people bailed on me. Otherwise, we'd be keeping you here a little longer.
Okay.
uses.
No need to apologize, Ed.
As long as we don't have